Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Marriage is Tougher Than Woodpecker Lips podcast. This is Brian.
And I'm Paul. We'd like to welcome you to a community meant for the men of the world to share our thoughts and perspectives on marriage.
We can learn from each other's experiences and help each other be better husbands. Now, let's get right into the show. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. And for our first time listeners, welcome for the first time. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about have you asked for accountability? We're going to hit what is accountability, how to open that space with your partner, how do we feel, or sorry, why do we feel we need it, who to get it from, and how to accept it.
Yeah, and we'd really like you to be a part of this community. So if you can catch up with us on our socials, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, just searching Marriage is Tougher. You can engage with us there on the topics that we talk about. And if you're interested in being a guest, you can go to marriageistougher.com and there's a form you can fill out. Also, please rate, subscribe to, follow, share any content that has affected you so that we can allow this community to grow and impact the world. So stay tuned for the full episode.
All right. So, have you asked for accountability lately? Have you?
Um, yes. And what that looks like for me is being available for people to know my stuff. Right? So it might not be, hey, I need you to make sure that I do this thing. But it's more when the situation arises, I don't shy away from my struggle points. And I may even say, hey, I'm currently struggling with this, or this experience happened, and then get feedback.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to do that. Oh, man. You know what? I do that at work, but not so much in my personal life. I might do that with you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I I need to lean into this space with my wife off the top. But I think it would be healthy for me to also have some other folks in my life that I can lean on and just ask for feedback and not just dump off on them like, hey, this stuff happened.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's good. That's real good. Um, so we need to define accountability. Did you happen to look that up?
I did, but it's not my favorite definition because it's the quality or state of being accountable. But then it says, especially an obligation or willingness to accept responsibility or to account for one's action. So I never actually looked up what it means. So it's actually like you're giving an account, but being okay for feedback of what happened in the account that you gave,
Okay.
which is wild. Like, but once you say it like that, you're like, oh, yeah, that's accountability. Like, I'm telling you what happened and I'm open to feedback.
Yeah. Interesting.
So, yeah, because accountable is subject to giving an account or capable of being explained. So you're explaining to someone something. So you're being accountable, and accountability is being open to for the feedback.
Okay. Yeah. Like when I think accountability, I'm typically thinking like holding me to a standard, right? Or accepting my role
Mm-hmm.
in whatever played out, right? But you're saying this definition reads a little bit different.
It does kind of, right?
Yeah.
Because if you are open to the right people and you're vulnerable with the right people, they will hold you to the standard that you have set for yourself.
Right.
So, right, we I think traditionally when we think of accountability, we think of the standard that we already set for ourselves,
Hmm.
but accountability has nothing to do with the standard. It's more so showing you the account that you've given.
Yep.
But most of the people that when we think accountability, they already understand the standard that is set. So
Yeah.
it's kind of injected outside of the definition.
Yeah.
But for the sake of our conversation, we can.
Well, no, because I like it because think about how many times you've gone to recount something, right? And you go off and like, yeah, this happened and they did that and da da da. And then the feedback you get is, I understand how you feel, but do you realize like you actually made that happen?
Mhm.
You know what I
Right.
mean? So I think that's kind of where we can marry what how we thought this conversation was going to go and the definition that we just read.
Right.
So, I mean, it's good. It works.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I am still in the process of doing this 5 years into my marriage, but opening this space
Hmm.
is very important. How would you advise someone to do so? Is this something you've had to tackle in your sessions?
Yes, but it's wrapped in with expectations,
That's good. Yeah.
right? But it's also wrapped into being an individual person in your marriage
Mhm.
because you, I guess the approach would be, where do I see myself and how do I see myself, right? As husband, as Paul, right? What are the things that I value and what do the things are the things that I expect from myself?
Okay.
Then, Crystal, my wife, what are those things? Do you agree with those? Is that something you want to attach to? And is there something that I'm missing that should be there? Now, together, my actions have to start lining up to those things. So when I give you an account of an experience, you now know where I should improve or where I did well. And now we figure out how to communicate that with each other.
And that sounds a lot like a healthy marriage. Uh, man, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of folks out there who need to learn how to do that, me included. I like it though. I like it quite a bit. And like I said, that's something that I've been intentional as of late to work on, really opening this space and like the definition says, is accepting that feedback because the feedback might not always be what you want it to be. Or if you're like me and you play out full conversations in your head before you have a conversation, even going so far sometimes to convince myself that I already had the conversation.
Right.
um, it can go bad if you're not prepared to accept your wife's opinion, perspective, all of those things, right? Um, I don't know. I feel like just saying "man up." I mean, I know there's more to it. I'm just saying, for me, I think that is something that a mindset that has helped me is just telling myself to man up.
Yeah, I think we have to start, we have to stop compartmentalizing our lives. And when I say that, I mean, so maybe at our job, we're
Mhm.
good at accountability, either giving or receiving. right? Or giving or receive, being aware that someone's giving you a situation and then you may need to help them along to get better, or knowing that other people may hear a work situation and come to you and be like, hey, you could have done that a little differently. Let's approach it differently. Maybe in a social club or team or anything like that, we also feel the same way. So we have to be open to that within our marriage as well. So we have to stop separating those good, healthy relationship building aspects and putting it in a different bucket when it comes to our marriage. Right? Because I found that when I am open with others, not my wife, it becomes a regular practice. So when those things come up with my wife, I'm open to receiving. It's a normal space. Like, oh man, yeah, I really didn't do that well, or as well. Um, so I think it's important for us to notice that we already do it well elsewhere.
Right.
So then figure out, how can I do it well within my marriage? Or if we're not, but if we're not giving accounts to anyone and we're not open to any type of criticism, that would also make it tough to bring that into your marriage. So it's kind of a two-sided reaction.
Yeah, I see that. I was thinking about this the other day where, I've been coached legitimately all of my life. And, the old adage, if I didn't care, then I wouldn't yell at you or,
Mm-hmm.
however that goes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I feel like if I messed up on the field or something and got yelled at or was getting feedback, like negative feedback, negative criticism, whatever it is, I typically responded in, okay, how can I do this better? Right. And then just wanted to prove that I had the ability to earn my position.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I kind of think about it this way when it comes to marriage. If my wife comes to me and has, some negative feedback about something that happened and saying, hey, I really need you to be better in this area, rather than internalizing it and thinking like, oh man, I messed up and like, you know, this is gonna go bad, or blowing up and like rejecting her, feedback and saying like, and like trying to push it back on her or turn the situation around, all that, right? What if I took that criticism as I would as a football player, right? And like, man, I need to earn my position back, right? Like, earn my position to be back in her good graces, earn my position back to have her trust me in whatever arena that is, right? Rather than like what I said, I think that would work for me. I don't think I've ever kind of operated in that manner in my marriage,
Mm-hmm.
but since you brought that up, that's where my mind went. And I think that might work.
That sounds, I feel like that would work with a lot of us, right? It's almost figure out what the end goal is, right? Because with our job, it's like we want to keep our job, or we want the promotion, we want to get more money, we want to stay where we are. Um, in a team or social club, we want to, obviously, whatever position we're playing, or we want to succeed in that space. And with our marriage, the goal is, like you said, back to, reconcile back the trust that you want her to have, or be in her good graces, or just, have a healthy, strong relationship, or it's just be ready so the next time I can add on to, the progress that I've made. Whatever it is, if we have an identifiable goal, for me, I'll say for me, not we, me. If I have an identifiable goal, I'm more apt to focus and not let the outside or negative aspects of it become the forefront. Like I see the positive and I see the goal. So I'm headed toward that thing. So I think that works.
Okay. So we also talked about why do we feel we need accountability? I think for me, it's kind of like, when I was growing up, the adults in my life would always be like, well, hey, make sure you're staying out of trouble or whatever. Right. And my mother would always make sure that I had plenty to do. Right. So there was never a season of my life where I wasn't in some sort of activity, typically sports, right? Football, track. I think when I was real little, it was like soccer and t-ball and little league, karate from the age of like 5, I think. And I don't know how I was connecting this in the moment, but I think that I don't know. I lost where I was going with that one, but I think that yeah, I don't know. I lost it.
Um, why do we need accountability?
Why do we need accountability?
Well, I would say maybe from those examples is if we think about, I'll say why we need it because we live in a community, right? And we may think of community as either a neighborhood or a city, but even you and your wife are your own community, right? Because it's outside of your head.
Hmm.
So we need accountability so that we realize if we are harming ourselves and in turn harming others. Or if we're excelling, we can bring others along, right? In whatever our actions are. If we are into something from a young age, we've understand and we develop a sort of acceptance of accountability, which I've never thought about this before. But if we've been coached or taught, or if we're in dance class, if we're in gymnastics, soccer, if we're on the chess club, any of those things, we're doing things with others, and we're either learning how to how to get coached up, accounted for, or we're learning how to reject it. Right. um
Feedback.
so but I feel like the need is we aren't doing life by ourselves. I mean, if we're listening to this podcast, we're talking about it. We're talking about marriage, the things of marriage, trying to be better husbands. So that means we're trying to be better for others, not just ourselves. So that is why we need accountability. We need to be able to have conversations and give our accounts of what happened and then have others give feedback on that.
Yeah. I appreciate you helping me to finish my tangented thought. But yeah, that's big. That all of those experiences that I've had have taught me to accept accountability and accept feedback. I just needed to be better at it earlier in my marriage.
Mhm.
Um, but now just thinking about it now, making that leap is helpful from my athletics history to not looking at my wife like she's a coach, but just knowing that I have the experience and capability to accept feedback.
Yeah, I mean, even if we're thinking sports or anything like that, I mean, there's generally leaders or like a captain or something, and obviously a good one will give you feedback, or even
Mm.
amongst your teammates that don't have titles, right? But it's, hey, like you need to get to the ball quicker. Like this is what we need to do. Like you need to be in the right position, or you need to funnel them to me so we can trap them, right? Like whatever these things we're doing, or you know, don't play that rook there. Like you're gonna get taken, right? We need to do that, right? If we're talking about that angles on pool, like playing poker, any of these things that we do, when we're learning, or we should be in a constant state of learning and figuring out and be able to get that feedback. That's what I kind of look to my wife as. She sees the things that I don't see,
Mhm.
right? Because she's outside of my brain. She's seeing even though she knows me and she knows kind of my heart and the way I approach things, she also sees my actions. And if they don't line up, we have to figure out why. Because I want my actions to reflect my heart and the being and how I feel. Sometimes that's not the case because I can be rude. Like it just is a thing. I can be snarky and rude, and sometimes I don't read the room all that well. I'm getting better at that for sure, but so there are things that I have to be willing to hear, and realize who it's from.
Yeah.
All right, if we're talking about who do we need to ask for it, who we need it from, those people that you trust that know you the best. And it might not be holistically, right? So maybe you're at work and your work people know you best in your work situation. They might not know you outside of work or any of that. So they can speak and be accountable and let you know how you can be your best at your job. Now, they might not be able to tell you how to be the best pool player,
Right.
right? But they know how the best to get you on your job. So we have to figure out those balances, and figure out that's who we need it from. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're talking about who has the appropriate perspective, right? In the NFL, when quarterback goes to the sideline and they get a call from the coach's box, they always accept that call,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the reason for that is because they have the broad perspective, right? They can see everything that's happening. And when you're in the moment, it may be that you're, I'll say, suffering from tunnel vision, right? But more to who should we accept this accountability from? Like Paul often says, your kids are built-in accountability partners, right? Now there may be some scenarios where you know th- their accountability isn't necessarily appropriate.
That's true.
But I think it needs to be said that there are many times when their accountability holds you to the standard of parent that you want to be,
Mm,
right? Like if I say I'm going to do something, like go ahead and do it, or
mm.
make sure you make a plan to get that done. Um, as we're talking about in marriage, that our spouses, right, um, our close friends, and then I think it needs to be said that we're talking about who should we get it from. There's maybe a need to say the people that we shouldn't be accepting this from.
I hear that. I feel like you have some people, so you start and I'll
Yeah. Well, I mean, opposite to what I started with is the people who don't have the right perspective,
mm,
right? So someone from outside of your marriage that you rarely talk to, but they, you know, happen to see a snippet of something going on, right? And then they want to offer advice as humans always do, but they don't know the whole story.
mhm.
So if you know that, like, take their advice with a grain of salt. Maybe listen to it, maybe not. But in that scenario, like I can't let them hold me accountable to something they know nothing about or very little about.
Yeah, another one is, and I'm going to say this, is parents.
Ooh.
Because if you're not doing life with your parent, that they have seen you grow from the kid to the adult
Mm.
to the married person that you are, they don't know the current you well enough to speak in. Now they can speak to the values that they've instilled in you or the values that you've expressed you wanted to have. But if they're not everyday life and you're not sharing more than just your problem scenarios, then it's not the healthiest for you to let them into the spaces of certain accountability within your marriage, right? Now
Yeah.
if you want them to keep you as a person accountable, that's different. But if you and your spouse haven't decided that is a space where your parents or one parent is um that's a healthy space for you as a married couple to have your parents in there. Don't do it.
Yeah,
You
man.
can have them be accountable to you all day, but don't introduce that marriage unless you guys have decided that's it.
That's tough right there. um, I don't know if I can think of any others off the top of my head. Um, but this is really, really an important topic because in my experience, there are no shortage of people who will want to speak into your marriage or who will try to speak into your marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And you really have to be careful about who you are accepting advice from, right? Ask yourself, like, what is their experience with what they're trying to teach you on, right? Is it someone who has failed in marriage a few times but never done it successfully, right? All right, well, I can learn maybe what not to do from you, but you have proven that you can't tell me how to do this appropriately. So if they point out to you, like, hey, you're making a mistake, and here's why, all right, now I know I'm making a mistake, but I probably need to go to someone else to figure out how to either correct it or, um, move forward appropriately, right?
Yeah, I mean that scenario is an interesting one because, like you said, we can figure out what to do wrong, and sometimes, and it's all about being intentional and really listening. Sometimes you can get that right advice because they could say do the opposite, but I would say then run said advice by someone who has championed that moment,
Yes.
right? So like, yeah, I was talking to someone, they have failed and they pointed out that I'm not doing this right. They also said a way to be better is this. Has this been your experience?
Yeah.
Because I mean, people are put in your life to show you where you have been or where not to go. So I don't want to totally discount that, but I would say the healthiest way is to pair that up with someone who has, like I said, championed that moment.
Yeah. Have we, as we're closing up here, have we talked enough about how to accept accountability from others now that we've decided who we want to take accountability from?
I don't know if we talked about the how,
Yeah.
um, which we need to. Um,
Yeah. I think maybe we mentioned it a little bit
yeah,
because I know I said, like, for me, it was more of an intentional conversation with myself, like, just Brian, you need to man up. Right. But I don't think that is logical for everyone. Right. So if I'm thinking back on my experience in my marriage of how I needed to accept and how I did accept accountability from my wife, um, for me, I think it all started when I decided that I'm going to choose to love her always. Right. So that means putting her before myself. And when I get into difficult situations within my marriage and a situation where I need to accept accountability from her, having that mindset of choosing to love her allows me to accept what she's saying to me, even when it's something I don't want to hear.
wow, bottle that up and sell it because that is, I mean, that is, I can't articulate that any better specifically the way you said it. Um, so please accept what Brian just said. Do the love your wife and do that. If if that is not something you can do currently, or something, I would say a a way to partner with what he said is evaluate where you get accountability elsewhere and to prove that you can take accountability and you can accept it. And then inject that love aspect and see that I can get this from my wife as well, because I can get it from elsewhere. And these people don't care about me, love me, want better for me than my wife does. So it's being intentional in two ways: intentionally knowing that you're going to love your wife, and intentionally knowing that, seeking that you can prove to yourself that you can accept and receive accountability and feedback from others. So just throw it right into your marriage.
That's good. Thanks for listening. If you got any value out of this episode, we'd like to invite you to rate, follow, and review on your favorite podcast platform.
If you would like to be a guest or want to have your questions answered, hit us up on our website, marriageisttougher.com, or follow us on Facebook, searching Marriage is Tougher Than Woodpecker Race. Thanks again. This is Paul.
And this is Brian. We will talk to you next time.